Welcome, gentle reader, to this episode of Everything is Everything, the show by Amit Varma and me. I'm Ajay. You will recall that we have long been passionate about measurement. We have an episode around nighttime lights data. Then we did an episode around the revolution in measurement that has arisen in the modern electronic world, where an amazing range of things are instrumented. There is a digital exhaust which reveals the world in front of our eyes in new ways, in unimaginable ways. Now, I will have you know that the name of Amit Varma in this crew is the Energizer Bunny, because he goes on and on. And the previous show would have gone on for 5 hours if we had
Continue. बोलो.
no,
बेइज्जती करो.
poker face.
That's not a poker face, but
I'll have you know.
our groupies are laughing. That's what you can hear in the background. Male groupie also, because hey,
I'll have you know, gentle reader, that in this team, the internal name for Amit Varma is the Energizer Bunny, because he goes on and on.
we were joking earlier about how Ajay Shah comes in 5 seconds. So this is
And the previous measurement episode would have been 5 hours, and it was an array of cool content. Then Amit saw a beautiful sub-problem, which is called men and women. And that's what we're going to do today.
we are going to do men and women today. So, you spoke of digital exhaust, which is basically a phone running out of battery. Digital exhaust, that's what it is. But yeah, so when we were building our all data episode, we had so many things to talk about that we said, let's do 2 episodes. And a natural category that came to mind was anything that has to do with men and women and how they relate to each other. Let's put them in a separate episode. And so we have.
Okay, Amit, get us going.
So I want to get you going by asking a question to you and to gentle readers. A long time ago, I can still remember, I had done this episode of The Seen and the Unseen called Metrics of Empowerment with 3 friends of mine, Nidhi Gupta, Hamsini Harihar and Devika Kher. Great episode, love it. The idea behind the episode was, let's talk about women's empowerment and let's talk about unusual data points that give us interesting insights about women's empowerment. And my starting point was, I had many years ago written a controversial column where I'd argued that India's rising divorce rates were a damn good thing. Because to me, rising divorce rates are a sign of women's empowerment. It means more and more women are getting the agency and empowerment to leave bad marriages, and it's fantastic. And it's an unconventional metric. What other metrics could we possibly have? Somebody suggested solo travels by women, which I am pleased to report is on the up and is possibly trackable. Nidhi Gupta came up with a great suggestion. She said, look at in how many families the last child is a male. Right? That's also revelative of about something about Indian society. Finally, you were the hope. Then Hamsini Hariharan, my good friend, came up with an excellent metric. Like, I just fucking love this one, which is see how many women are in prisons. More women in prisons is a good thing because it means more women have agency. More women have opportunity to commit crime and to go out in the world and etc. etc. So it's a fantastic metric. Another metric that came up in that episode was how many men download big basket apps. Because, the assumption there is that if men are ordering groceries, that is surely a good thing because, tasks are getting split within the household. Some of the unpaid labor is also being done by the men. The flip side of this is that in many traditional families, what happens is that the man is the one who pays for everything. That's why he's downloaded the app. He'll still hand it to the woman and say, go bhi choose karo, and the woman will add whatever and he will simply pay for it, which is the same old patriarchal bullshit. It doesn't solve anything at all. So
you remember in life lessons, we've had this conversation around agency, and we had this idea about buying pizza. So there is a decision that let's have pizza. There is the decision that let's order Domino's. and then the menfolk instruct the woman buy me a Domino's. So when the woman is using the app to buy a Domino's pizza, it's not fully concomitant with the agency of waking up and saying, guys, let's have pizza.
You got to disentangle this shit. Like I remember, and a topic I'll come back to later in this episode is a very standard thing. Economists study of women participation in the workforce. I've had many episodes on this with the likes of Namita Bhandare and Ashwini Deshpande, Shrana Bhattacharya, etc., etc. I'll link them from the show notes. And one sort of puzzle that keeps coming up is that women's participation in the labor force went up for a while, and then it really dipped drastically when it shouldn't have because incomes were rising. And one of the reasons, this is multi-causal, so we should not simplify this, but one of the many reasons for this is that many families, when they reached a certain income level, it was felt that now the woman doesn't need to go out and work, that it affects the family honor if the woman is going out and working. So now that we can afford to not have the woman working, she should stay at home for the family izzat. So, a terrible sort of toxic value that on the one hand, the woman worked and a good thing happened, the income level rose. But on the other hand, your cultural mores are still so backward that you're kind of stuck in that. And it's worthwhile thinking of interesting metrics for this. A metric that I have come up with recently, but it's from a very old observation, is the temperature of default air conditioning in offices. Because what happened with air conditioning was when air conditioning became common in offices in the 1950s and 60s, it was designed for men in suits. Now, men have a different metabolic rate than women. We prefer it colder, right? So a temperature that is normal for me would be too cold for a woman. And no doubt every married couple watching this has had arguments at some point, normally where where the wife is saying, hey, I'm so cold, and the husband is saying, put on a sweater, etc., etc., right? And my thinking is that over time, I would like to see this normalized to some kind of equilibrium where both men and women are kinda comfortable, and therefore the temperature goes up a little bit from whatever the default low is. So I don't know how this is measurable at scale, but something like this would also be interesting. So I want to throw this as an exercise at you guys, that if you had to come up with interesting metrics for empowerment, please tell us in the comments, what would they be? A lot of standard ones would be two-wheeler and car ownership by women and so on and so forth. But, what would you say?
So I've had a measurement idea on this subject, not implemented it, but I think A, it's feasible, and B, it's worth doing. So what we should do is we should get a little bit of a tele lens and stick a camera outside the window so that it gets a frame which is the pavement. Okay, it's the people on the street. Because I don't want too much other clutter, I just want the street. Then we should write the code that will A, count the number of people visible in the frame, and B, classify their gender. Okay, so given modern advances in image classification, this ought to be possible. And then the question would be, how many women are out in the public square? Also, by time of day. I've worked in the field of crime victimization surveys. You see an edited book on that subject, and I have some work in this field. And one of the very interesting questions that you ask parents is, what time do you think your teenage daughter should be back home? Okay, and it is a measure of the empowerment of women, that parents should say midnight, 3 a.m., whatever. We're fine with her being out, which is a combination of social mores and the parents' perception of a woman's safety. So in this camera and image classifier based system, what you would see is a certain fraction of the people walking on the street being women, and B, we'd see the tail off of that ratio as the evening comes in. And these are both very revealing things. And this is really, a little piece of software that needs to be built. And then there could be these cameras all over the world just quietly purring and producing daily data for the presence of women in the public square.
Measurement. One of the books that really excited me when I read it a few years ago was a book called Everybody Lies by Seth Stevens Davidowitz. I wrote an essay on it also for the magazine Pragati, which I then edited. So, an archived version of this will be in the show notes. You can check it out. And I thought it was a phenomenal book. And I thought it was a phenomenal book because it had a phenomenal idea at the heart of it. And the idea at the heart of it is, how do we understand human nature, right? At one level, people will talk about how art or literature or cinema should reveal the human condition. Fancy words, but harder said than done, and often only done by art in an elusive way, which is the best way it can manage. And that's what you can do. Data doesn't get anywhere near it because all data could either be stated preferences or you're getting only part of the picture. Seth Stevens Davidowitz's core premise was that people are most truly themselves when they are searching for something online because they are anonymous and they are searching for something that obviously they really want. Maybe it's a question, maybe it's information, product, whatever, and their true selves are there. In the sense that Gabriel Garcia Marquez often talks about how we have three selves: a public self, the private self, and the secret self. Right? The public self is the public self. Dear Everything is Everything readers, you get the public self, which is an authentic self, but it's not all of us. There's part of us which is a private self, which is only known to intimates. For example, very few people now know that you only last 5 seconds, which was private until now. Now it's public, right? And perhaps it was secret once. Perhaps it was one of those things that nobody knew. Like the secret I told you, that I often get asked by people that I, this is going to take as long as one of your episodes. But having said that, so there's a public self, the private self, and the secret self. And the private self would be known to a handful of intimates, Dunbar's smaller number, not 150 but 5. And the secret self is known to nobody. I was chatting with our crew, Namsita and Vaishnav, about secret selves, and we kind of, actually both of them said they have no secrets, but I have a secret self certainly, and most people I talk to do. And our secret self would be kind of known to nobody except Google Baba. So when we are searching online, there is no filter because nobody's watching. Like, there's that phrase, dance like no one's looking. So in a sense, when we are searching online, we are expressing ourselves as if no one's looking. It's a safe space. And what Stevens Davidowitz did was he got a ton of anonymized data from the likes of Google, Facebook, Pornhub, and so on, and looked at that data to figure out what insights they reveal about society. Can they be verified? Are they actionable? And so on and so forth. And some of them are pretty excellent. For example, racism in America. Right? Many people were completely taken aback by Trump's rise in 2016. But long before that, 4 years before that, in fact, you could have seen it coming from the Google searches. You could have seen it from the number of people who are searching for the N word, who instead of searching for Obama as first black president are searching for first N president. And the states in which it is happening, which happens to be the states that voted a particular way 4 years later. And you could already see that coming up then. After these recent elections, Stephen Davidowitz wrote a column for The Economist where he pointed out that more than all these surveys that were going around and they were all over the TV news, all you had to do was look at Google to figure out what was happening. For example, he showed that in the states where people searched for the Trump-Harris debate, Trump won. In the states where they searched for the Harris-Trump debate, Harris won. Right? Just that word order. And it's such a subtle thing. It is not something you and I would think of even looking for. But when you, unleash your machines on this, these are the kind of findings, the really interesting findings that you get. So there's a lot of stuff on politics, understanding political trends, understanding voter behavior, understanding investor behavior, understanding buyer behavior, all of that stuff you can get from the data. What fascinated me about it was what that data, which he found in his book, reveals about human relationships. So I look at my notes and read out some of the findings, right? Number one, the top complaint about a marriage is not having sex. Searches for sexless marriage are 3.5 times more common than unhappy marriage and 8 times more common than loveless marriage, right? And there are 16 times more complaints about a spouse not wanting sex than about a married partner not willing to talk. contrary to stereotypes, there are twice as many complaints that a boyfriend won't have sex than that a girlfriend won't have sex. In fact, the number one search complaint about a boyfriend is, my boyfriend won't have sex with me, right? And this is not even marriages, it's kind of boyfriends and girlfriends. Then again, we spoke about revealed preferences and stated preferences, right? And economists use the term revealed preferences to show how you can learn about people by what they do, not by what they say. So only 25% of men and 8% of women admit to searching for pornography. But the numbers are far greater than that. In fact, many more men search for porn than for weather, which is, except you, I think you search a lot for weather, don't you? Yeah, but you can't jerk off to clouds. So there's an understandable reason for that. And he got a lot of data from Pornhub as well, right? And in Pornhub, incest is a common category. But one of the most interesting things he found is that 25% of searches by women is for violence on women, right? Non-consent is a popular category. And when it comes to violence on women and non-consent, more women make those searches than men. This is deeply counterintuitive. It is extremely disturbing. And Stevens Davidovitz clarifies, and anyone should indeed clarify, that what you might search for or what you might fantasize about has nothing to do with what you would actually want in the real world. In fact, I have often found that, and I was thinking about this today, that, you know, you have actually different kinds of instincts. There is one kind of instinct that you have in your fantasies, but a completely different kind of instinct when you're actually in bed with someone. And one should not sort of conflate the two. But it's interesting to figure out, note that we are hardwired in very interesting and sometimes disturbing and sometimes contradictory ways. And just figuring that shit out is important, but not everything is about hardwiring. A lot of things are about culture. Like, one of the fascinating things about the book is that he looks at different countries and sees how people behave differently in all of those countries. For example, let's talk about India, and this is an experiment you, dear readers, can carry out yourself. And here's the experiment. Use Google's autocomplete feature and put in a set of words and see what it gives you. And ideally, if you have a VPN, go and set your location to Australia, as I did, or Europe if you feel like, and just see what you did. And interestingly, at one point in time, if you searched for "my husband wants," the number one autocomplete at the time he wrote the book was "my husband wants me to breastfeed him." Right? And the number two was "my husband wants me to breastfeed his friends." And the interesting sort of realization there was, porn searches for depictions of women breastfeeding men are 4 times higher in India and Bangladesh than in any other country in the world. And I simply don't get this. I mean, I tried to figure out that what are the cultural reasons behind this, that it should be 4 times higher here, and what is this obsession? And I know we are deeply repressed, but the repression can take other forms of expression. Why would you search for this in particular?
Can VPNs place different states in India? So is that a fertile vein of research that could be undertaken on differences between the states of India?
It's a great idea. I have ExpressVPN, which only does countries, not states in India. But it's actually a great idea, and I wonder if, there's a project in that. And it's not just breastfeeding. I picked out one thing which I simply didn't understand. It kind of boggled my mind. And I think Indians' preference for erotic fiction also features a lot more incest and cuckolding than for other countries. But leaving that aside, those are interesting quirks. So you will be pleased to know that today breastfeeding is down to number two. It's no longer number one. Number one is "my husband wants me to serve his mistress," as you can see from the screenshot on the screen. I also tried "my wife wants." And one of the results was "my wife wants a dancing Arab." And other results included "my wife wants me dead by the third watch," whatever the fuck that means. "My wife wants me to take her last name." "My wife wants me to die." "My wife wants me to cut off my sister." So, all interesting ones. These are all India, by the way. Also search for "why is my wife." So here's a screenshot of that, and you can see what's going on there. So I did the VPN thing. I said that, okay, let's go to somewhere. I was about to say, let's go to somewhere different and see what happens. So I set my VPN to Australia, because I watch a lot of cycling, and SBS Sports offers free cycling every day. So I'm watching the Vuelta a España these days at the time of recording. But anyway, so Australia, and this is a screenshot. "My husband wants an open marriage, and an open marriage novel, a second wife novel, to eat, to eat my poop." Right? So these are some of the searches. So from this, I can only gather that Australians want to read books about the things that they are bothered about. Because an open marriage novel, though it might even be the name of a novel, I have no idea. But my husband wants to eat my poop is interesting. And I would say that the Indian preferences we referred to earlier are considerably more edible. And other things to note: is my husband, if you do is my husband, you are far more likely to get gay than cheating. So, is my husband gay is much more popular than is my husband cheating. I would also encourage you to look for things like I want to do, right? So and has one result. So it's kind of and again, I want you to carry out your own experiments, and some of this is funny stuff, you're just laughing, but can you actually get serious stuff about it? Like if you put the names of some celebrities, you might well find that the top query is a query for the cast. I remember doing this 10 years back, and it was, and I'm like, okay, what the fuck, you know. So it's interesting because this is I mean, this is you don't have to be a privileged recipient of anonymized data from Google. The autocomplete process gives you the top results if you do it in an incognito window, unbiased by what you might have searched for earlier. So it's absolutely worth trying, and there are insights in there. A few other things. A few other learnings from the book, and I'm just quoting from the book, and these are great, make of them what you will. Men conduct more searches for how to make their penises bigger than how to tune a guitar, make a omelette, or change a tire. Point to note. Then, women are most frequently concerned that their vaginas smell like fish, followed by followed by vinegar, onions, ammonia, garlic, cheese, body odor, urine, bread, bleach, feces, sweat, metal, feet, garbage, and rotten meat. As Stephen Davidovich says, we are also busy judging our own bodies that there is little energy left over to judge other people's, which you would agree is a good thing. And finally, and this hints at a deep truth about men, two deep truths about men, their self-obsession and their stupidity, right? It is an awesome insight. It's my favorite insight from the book. Men make as many searches looking for ways to perform oral sex on themselves as they do how to give women an orgasm. Ajay, have you ever searched for something like this? I don't think so. Other interesting things. Having kids. I once wrote a column on how it's immoral to have children, partly to be provocative, and a lot of parents got really pissed off. I have understood why they got pissed off after reading this book. People are 7 times more likely to ask Google whether they will regret not having children than whether they will regret having children. Fair enough, you would expect that conventional view. Then, but the second data point: adults with children are 3.6 times more likely to tell Google they regret their decision than are adults without children. So, full buyer's remorse happening, if you can call parenting buying or whatever, procreating buying.
A
But
durable, irreversible good.
there you go. And okay, Google data also reveals the ugly gender bias of parents. I think I'm reading out from my essay. I don't know if these are his words. I was quoting him in my essay, but whatever. All the facts are from his book. Parents are 2.5 times more likely to ask, "Is my son gifted?" than "Is my daughter gifted?" Then parents Google, "Is my daughter overweight?" roughly twice as frequently as they Google, "Is my son overweight?" This bias flies in the face of facts. Firstly, at young ages, girls have consistently been shown to have larger vocabularies and use more complex sentences. They are also more likely than boys to be enrolled in gifted programs in schools. Secondly, about 28% of girls are overweight, while 35% of boys are. And this gender bias is a global gender bias. I would imagine it is far worse in India, and it would in fact be interesting to figure out what are the other manifestations of this bias. And Steven Davidovich has this great line, which I think is very illuminative, where he says, "Facebook is digital brag to my friends about how good my life is, serum." In Facebook world, the average adult appears to be happily married, vacationing in the Caribbean, and perusing the Atlantic. In the real world, a lot of people are angry on supermarket checkout lines, peeking at the National Enquirer, ignoring the phone calls from their spouse whom they haven't slept with in years. So it's a magnificent sentence, obviously, and the full book is full of sort of rich facts. And I'm not so interested anymore in the politics stuff, partly because I've just given up on politics. The world is going to hell, every side is full of shit. But in terms of society, because so many of us are not just never revealing our true selves to anyone at all, we are not even revealing it to ourselves. Like, a good insight, and I forget where I got it from, was about how if you are not your authentic self, you can never be truly loved. Because how can someone love you for what you are if you are not yourself, if you know, if you don't reveal that part of you? I think Paul Graham might have said it. And that's a deep truth. And a lot of the time we are projecting a side of ourselves that is not true, except when we are searching. And I think many of us would even be in denial about that part of our nature which we reveal when we are searching, which is very bizarre and disturbing.
No, so Amit, you did well in saying to the gentle reader that do this yourself. Okay. And it is so interesting to curiously wonder what is the world searching for. On a similar note, trends.google.com is your friend. It is so great where you can put in strings, store the URL. It's effectively like a fixed query that you can run, and you can watch the world unfold and think about what it is that people are focusing on. So we don't need to focus on the things that others focus on, but sometimes it's interesting to know what the world is thinking about.
And also, I think what happens is that all of us live in a bubble of some sort. I have a particular kind of bubble, you have a particular kind of bubble. No matter where you are, you live in a bubble of some sort, because society is so diverse and so vast and contains such multitudes that you're never actually going to understand all of it or know all of it, and so on and so forth. And I think that one, we need to be up and about in the world and get exposed to as much of it as possible. But two, sometimes the data also gives you interesting insights which you might not otherwise have guessed about the people around you. Like now, the next time I'm in a bus or something, though I don't travel in buses, but the next time I'm in a bus, I will look around me and I will think, 30% of these men want to be breastfed. What the fuck, dude? I'll be like judging every guy out there. Let
Yeah,
me
so
tell you that.
that's where the analogies break down. Like, we are in a bubble, we live in our secluded communities, whereas this data reflects the median Indian, and the median Indian is a very different person from us. Take us forward, Amit. Where do we go next on men and women?
I want to take you more forward than you expect. Have you ever been on a dating app, Ajay Shah?
For about 10 seconds.
So you lasted twice as long as one would expect.
Yeah.
Well done. This is, this used to be a family show till this episode, but I think everything's kind of gone to hell. So I want to talk about dating apps data, both in the context of the world and in the context of India, and the multiple sources, multiple studies done on this from all over the place. Firstly, dating apps. As people from our generation would know, I also have never had a dating app on my phone, are uh, are such an alien thing, right? When we grew up, it was like really difficult to meet women. And here's the thing: I have often spoken, but not for you, but yeah, but I have often spoken about how we are in that generation. I am in that generation. You might be a bit older, where we shifted seamlessly from communities of circumstance to communities of choice. So I am born where I am. Geography constrains me, and I go to school where I go to work where I go, and I only have those communities of circumstance. If I'm a weirdo of some sort, or if I have interests that no one else shares, I'm basically a loner, as I was till my early adulthood, in fact, and it is what it is. It's not a very nice situation, but then the internet opened up everything, and we could form communities of choice, and most of my friends today are people I've met online. As I think I mentioned before, you and I would not be sitting here like this. We're both in Bombay, but we met because of the internet, though not on a dating app. I should really clarify that. So, though I would always swipe right on you. But anyway, if swipe right is a correct direction. So dating apps are really interesting because what they did was they did a couple of things. One, in the dating sense, it took you out of the community of circumstance. You were no longer constrained by the people you knew and the social circles around you and your workplace in the partner that you would meet. This frees you up. One, it allows you to be more selective. There is this romantic concept of a soulmate. Now, the thing is that if you do have one soulmate meant for you, you are extremely unlikely, given world population and circumstances and surface area of serendipity, to meet that soulmate. You will forever not meet that soulmate. That soulmate will party with other people. It is what it is. However, your chances of meeting someone good go up drastically if you are able to go on a dating app where there are many more people who would not otherwise be in your circle, and if you can choose on the basis of the attributes that you find attractive. So, number one, that is one impact of it. It allows you to be more selective. Number two, it allows you to express yourself in ways, or if I may avoid the euphemism, to be more promiscuous than you otherwise would. This is especially in the case of women who might otherwise, in a limited social circle, feel awkward about being promiscuous because they will be judged for it and they will be slut shamed and all of that. But in the anonymity of a dating app where you're meeting people and you can actually check how many connections whoever you're dating has with your existing friend group, etc., etc. You actually have a little more anonymity, a little more certainty. I remember in one of these surveys, I read the school quote by this girl who said that, look, I have to go on a dating app because I don't want to date someone from my college, because if it doesn't work out, I will have to see him every day and I might even have to see him with another girl every day. So it is okay. I'll go on a dating app, date someone who I will never run into otherwise. And so a dating app creates all of these interesting dynamics. And the result is now another survey that I came across, and many surveys have many different kinds of figures, but on this they all kind of correlate, that 60% of all recent marriages happened when people met through an online dating app. More and more people are meeting their partners through dating apps. This is especially so, by the way, in the case of people of alternate sexualities. If you're LGBTQ, etc., your immediate circle of acquaintances is even more likely to be deeply restrictive. So if you are a gay person, say born in 1960, you could spend your whole life alone. If you're a gay person born in the year 2000, you're not going to spend your whole life alone. You have many more options open to you, and that's just remarkable and beautiful and something to be celebrated. Now, the thing is, what do dating apps tell us, number one, about how we are, and number two, by changing our canvas of action, how do they actually change us? So again, that reflexivity concept that we discussed in the last episode. So here are some interesting findings that I think are worth sharing. So finding number one, and I'll link some of these studies from the show notes wherever relevant. Finding number one, which I find very interesting and a bit dubious in a way that I'll tell you later, is that studies find that women tend to look for men more or less the same age. So whether they're 20 or 25 or 30, they'll tend to look for men more or less the same age as them. Whereas men always tend to look for younger women. So even if whether they're in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, they're looking for women in their 20s. And OkCupid survey showed that they always zero in on the 21-year-old age group, right? So that's where they inevitably land up. And the reason I said I found this dubious is that this doesn't exactly correlate with what one understands of human nature. And I was discussing with a friend of ours today, I won't name her because I haven't taken a permission in advance. And what she said was that in her experience, it is natural because a woman will want to be seen dating men who are more or less the same age, because that is a socially acceptable thing to do. If you're meeting someone for a date at a Starbucks, it will be weird if it's someone much younger or much older. But she said that in her personal case, she prefers to be with men who are either much older or much younger, both of which make sense for natural selection reasons, which we need not get into here. And it also kind of makes sense for men to have the attractions they did. I'm not going to be judgy here or be normative or whatever. Certain things about human nature are icky. And the delightful thing about culture is that we can mitigate those aspects of human nature with our behavior and with our choices. But this is an interesting preference that comes along. So Ajay, I have a question for you before I proceed. Have you heard the term Tinder Gini coefficient?
Nope.
Okay, what is Gini coefficient?
It's a measure of inequality. It's the area between the 45-degree line and the cumulative distribution of income.
Well done. There's a Tinder Gini coefficient of 0.58, which shows more inequality than 95% of the countries in the world. And that inequality is between men and women. Here's what is happening. Women are far more selective on dating apps for very good reasons than men are. So they are 5 to 14% likely to swipe right on a random profile that they see. Men are like 50%. Chalte raho. And therefore, what typically happens is that there's a very small percentage of men who are attractive or whose profiles are attractive, who get selected by a lot of women, and a large percentage of men who don't get selected at all and are therefore bitter and resentful and get more and more so. Whereas the women are getting a lot of attention, it's not a problem for them at all, right? Men are 6.2 times more likely to like a woman than vice versa, according to another study. Now, this has implications, and the implications are that this leads to the rise of what we today call incels, right? We've discussed the show Adolescence, what an awesome show it is. A lot of the complaints of the manosphere are actually based on this real data and this real problem. That a lot of men feel that it is completely unfair, that you could be a median woman and you'll get dates and you'll get attention and all of that. If you're a median man, you are basically getting no interest from the opposite sex, at least on the dating apps, right? And it just becomes incredibly difficult, and therefore it makes you resentful. It makes you want to game the system. You try to figure out how to game the system. I remember 25 years ago, I entered this rabbit hole of what today would be called the manosphere. I was just fascinated. I wanted to learn about it. A guy called Neil Strauss came up with a book called The Game, which was a kind of a handbook for pickup artists, but it also showed a great understanding of human nature, right? And it was a deeply it was basically a handbook of manipulation. How do you manipulate women to get to like you, to get to date you, etc., etc. And and that was a bestseller, and that's now burgeoned out into a whole ecosystem of its own. It's all over all the social media apps, and it's a big, big thing. And a very small part of it featured in the show Adolescence, but a very, very small part of it. And the point is that the resentment is real, the anger is real. There are men who buy books on this. You know, you go to Gumroad, for example, is a popular place where manosphere advice books are sold, and a lot of these men think of it as a game that they have to win by hook or by crook. It's no longer about how to find love, because they've just given up. They're just not getting selected, and there is a lot of resentment happening there.
Okay, I'm curious and I'm not understanding. The basics of the nature of male desire and female desire have probably not changed in 65,000 years. So, what's different here? And how did these behaviors change when the internet and dating apps appeared? Or is it that this is the way it has always been, and all that's new is the fact that we are measuring it?
So while both of us are very keen hobbyists on the subject of natural selection, I think none of us are experts. So I don't want to speculate too much on the why of it. But if you just go back to the ways that we are hardwired, and again, I'm not using this as a justification or being normative and saying that this is good. But if you look at the ways we are hardwired, a biologist would tell you that men are hardwired to seek youth and beauty, and women are hardwired to seek status and affluence, and therefore there will be a small percentage of men who will be attractive to the women, and the men beyond a point just want to spread their seed as much as possible. They don't want to be too selective. The women per force have to be more selective because they are wired to be selective. They get
No,
a
but
baby, they are stuck for 9 months.
applying that
So
kind of reasoning, that these basics have been in place forever,
let me
ever
finish.
since the
Let
rise
me
of modern
finish.
man.
Let me finish. So, what I would postulate is that typically when you have a close circle, right? I know 10 people, and I know 10 men, I know 10 women, I've got a small circle of people, I've got to choose from within that. I have much less scope to be selective. But I go to a dating app, I have a million people to choose from. And, I will obviously pick a very small percentage of people because I have so many people to choose from, and I'm being super selective. And I will immediately then, pick the ones I'm hardwired to, who would not otherwise be in my social circle, who I would not have access to. So all the sort of middling men who would otherwise get women because those women don't have access to high status men. And these are phrases used in the manosphere, by the way: high status man, high status woman, etc., etc. Body count is a phrase that will come up a lot. I don't want to go into that. Maybe someday we'll do a separate episode on that. But this is sort of the thinking. This is the probable reason that this has happened, because the data shows us this ambiguously. Women are extremely selective. Only a few men get picked. Almost all the women get picked. And therefore what happens is that the women have far more choice and control, right? They are literally in command when it comes to the app. They are not in control, and I'll come to that part later when they are out of the app. But when it comes to making that choice, women hold all the cards. And this is something that the manosphere is, of course, pissed about. And the data shows us this is the situation. So, what do you do about it, and how do you respond to it, and how do you think about this? Like, I often think about different sort of equilibria, right? We have discussed this before, and it's orthogonal to the subject of this episode, but nevertheless, it's interesting to bring up that I think of marriage as a form that evolved at a particular point in time when society was a particular way. You were meeting limited people, there were social norms in place, and marriage was a way of enforcing some of those, etc., etc. And it evolved as an uneasy equilibrium which would keep women and men mildly satisfied, a lot unsatisfied in both, for different reasons in both cases. But it was okay. It was an equilibrium that worked. And that equilibrium in modern society, I'm not sure works anymore. At the very least, it needs to be redefined. One of the subjects we've discussed a lot is how marriage is a bundle of all of these things like love, sex, companionship, friendship, shared parenthood, etc., etc. And what happens when an unbundling happens? How do you organize your relationships? How do you organize your life? I think that is something that modern society hasn't figured it out. We discussed it in our World in 2050 episode. So that's something the world hasn't figured out and is grappling with. And part of the figuring out is how do we meet people of the opposite sex? How do we date? How do we interact? And I'm not sure that the model of these dating apps, and it might well be that dating apps look very different 20 years from now, but the way that they look now, in what will one day maybe seem to be a primitive form, something's not working, right? Something's gone wrong. I'll talk more about this in detail, but I want to read out this great quote by Rob Henderson, who has great thoughts on this. He's a guy who coined the term luxury beliefs. We did an episode on that. Rob Henderson has thought really deeply about this, and here's a fantastic tweet that he posted once. Men high on the dark triad, psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, use dating apps. They might make up 10 to 20% of users. They go on a rampage, sleep with lots of women, play games with them, lead them on, lie to them, ghost them, etc. Dark triad men are excellent imposters. They are good at mimicking desirable romantic qualities and are thus able to procure lots of sex partners. The women they sleep with become disillusioned. These women begin to behave in psychopathic and narcissistic ways to protect themselves from emotional vulnerability and pain, and perhaps as a way to even the score with men as a category. They learn to avoid dark triad men and exploit ordinary non-psychopathic men. These men become confused and upset and begin to treat other women the same way to get even. In short, one possible interpretation of what's happening is that dark triad men mistreat women, who then mistreat ordinary men, who then mistreat ordinary women. Of course, there are plenty of high dark triad women as well, just not as many as there are among men. Bad behavior drives out the good. A system tailor-made for psychopathic males, dating apps facilitate anonymity, superficiality, and deception, predictably gives rise to a defect equilibrium. Eventually, you have a situation where everyone adopts dark triad strategies of emotional coldness, unfeeling callousness, and calculated duplicity to obtain sex and to avoid getting hurt. Right? Equally, there was a survey carried out in 2024 called the Romantic Recession Report. And what that found is that, many singles have become completely pessimistic because of declining trust. Women feel that they can't trust strangers and they avoid dating altogether. And many men feel that, hey, women don't give us a fair chance, it's unfair, etc., etc. The old incel complaint magnified that even when I am with you, I'm not kind of getting all of that. And I want to sort of at this point talk about India, right? Malini Goel, who was a guest on The Seen and the Unseen, did an excellent book with a co-author called Unboxing Bengaluru. So what she did in that was she looked at Tinder data from 3 cities, and the cities were Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. And what she measured was that those people who end up going to another person's house after meeting them from the app, how long do they take? In Delhi, it was a matter of months. In Mumbai, it was a matter of weeks. In Bangalore, it was a matter of days. Right? And many factors. Delhi is a low trust society. In Mumbai, housing is at a premium. In Bangalore, many singles tend to live alone, so it's much easier to go to someone's house and all of that. But the quantitative data showed her that there is a very high degree of promiscuity. Then she went out and did a qualitative work and spoke to people. And what she found was that, yeah, among those who use the dating apps, the promiscuity was off the charts, but nobody was happy. And the problem was that it was impossible to build a relationship. First of all, you got completely jaded. And second of all, you would not put in the work to build a relationship. Like back in the day, you fell for someone, you chatted with them, you had an argument, you came back to see them, you tried to work things through. You tried to resolve the friction that would arise. Today you don't. Today you have 10 other choices waiting on your app who are chatting with you in real time. And if there's something mildly wrong with one person, you're like, you come in just 5 seconds, not worth it. So, and you move on. So there's that multiplicity of choices. There is the jadedness. No one's happy. You're thinking about how to build long relationships. I had done an excellent episode with Samarth Bansal and Sanjana Ramchandran, who's in fact written a book on this subject now, on finding love in modern India, about how it is on dating apps and how hard it is, differently hard for men and women. So that's a good ep that has a deep dive into this. And I've been thinking, and this is a suggestion of a friend of mine. She was very keen to do this episode on people who don't use dating apps and why they don't, right? And there are a couple, there's another friend of ours in Bangalore, a guy who is exactly like that. So I'm trying to kind of get them together so I can do an episode on that with them in future. But it's very interesting, and that a lot of people are turning away from dating apps, and there is a term now that has come into vogue called the sex recession, that people are having less and less sex than they used to. So Gen Z, much less than millennials, that they're actually moving away from it, going back towards family values. And there is data on how, I think, 3 out of the 10 men surveyed said they hadn't had sex for a year, and 1 in 4 women said the same thing, and etc. etc. So compared to the previous generation, if you compare the data, there is this sex recession thing happening. So if you just look at the dating apps, you get a very interesting mapping of what is going on all over the place. And it is a mapping of what women want, of what men want, of the difficulties therein. And again, if you have observations, gentle readers, please leave it in the comments. We'd love to learn, because you and I are being truth hereticians here. None of us has been on a dating app. At least you claim not to have, and I haven't. So, but I find this whole field very fascinating, because the world is completely different from when I was a young man, and I don't know what I would do today.
But I just want to put up the sharp contrast here between what we are seeing in this conversation vis-a-vis some of the other ideas in measurement. When the bird in the sky photographs North Korea at night, it makes no difference to North Korea. So North Korea is completely unaffected by the act of measurement. Here you have a complete Heisenberg uncertainty principle at work, that on one hand, the phenomena of interest were rendered observable by the dating apps. That before there were the dating apps, this kind of information was not there. And so I started asking you, what's new? Like, is this how human beings have always been? And I think you've done a good argument that no, this is new, that the behaviors have changed because of the introduction
I
of
think
the
the
dating
instincts were
apps.
always the same because they are what they are,
Yeah.
but the behaviors have changed.
Yeah. So here the dating apps have simultaneously created observability, but then they have completely changed the system as well. Okay, Amit, let's go further. Men and women,
Ajay, how many films have you seen in your life?
probably 30.
30 films. Is one of them this great film called When Harry Met Sally?
No.
You haven't seen When Harry Met Sally, written by Nora Ephron, directed by Rob Reiner, Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. The greatest orgasm in movie history, right? I absolutely love it. I had such a crush on Meg Ryan when she did that in that restaurant. But, you will never know what it is because you don't watch movies. It's very sad. It's very sad. But here was the premise of the film. The premise of the film was, early in the film, I think Billy Crystal says to Meg Ryan, or his character says to her character, men and women can't be friends because the sex part always gets in the way. This is a fundamental premise of the film, and eventually they have on-off romance, and it's a very nice, charming film, etc., etc. So recently, Facebook carried out a study where they looked at 1.8 billion adult Facebook users. They mapped 1.4 trillion links between them. Okay, it was a massive data set. You have studied this in great detail, I know. I'll ask you to talk about it. And they estimated the closeness of each connection. And they turned this into a cross gender friendship index, which in this beautiful piece, the economist said should actually be named the When Harry Met Sally index. And you can call it Whimsy. So whimsy is great. I was calling it the whimsy index till I realized that the I at the end of it stands for index. So it would be like calling it When Harry Met Sally index, which we don't want to do. So let's just call it whimsy. And what does whimsy mean? A score of 0 means that men and women are entirely segregated. They don't talk to each other. A score of 1 means you have an equal number of same sex and cross sex friends. So, do you have as many male friends as you have female friends? If the answer is yes, then your score is 1. If you have no female friends, which I know is not the case with you because you're popular and gregarious and charming and you have good shirts, then that number is not 0 either. It's somewhere between 0 and 1. And I think in your case, it would be more than 1, right? You have more cross gender friends. Is that the case? You don't count. Yeah, you're just being coy about this, Ajay Shah. And so this is a whimsy index, and the data set is fascinating. I'll leave it to you to talk more about it. Obviously, I was really surprised to find that India is doing quite well. India is at 0.35 on the on whimsy, and that struck me as not something I would have expected, because something that I have observed and you have also said is that the biggest problem in India is that men don't know how to talk to women. There is sexual repression, there is tremendous awkwardness around social interaction. It's just a weird scene. So that 0.35 actually seemed a pretty high number for me. And obviously, in some countries, it correlates with how many women are in the workplace, because obviously you're more likely to have friends then. And that number is kind of low for India as well. So there it correlates. A 0.35 makes sense, but otherwise I didn't know what to make of it. So what are your thoughts on the whimsy index, or on whimsy, not index?
On the proposition where you started, I want to read a quote from Parade's End by John Ford Maddox. You seduced a young woman in order to be able to finish your talks with her. You could not do that without living with her. You could not live with her without seducing her. But that was the byproduct. The point is that you can't otherwise talk. You can't finish talks at street corners, in museums, even in drawing rooms. You may not be in the mood when she is in the mood for the intimate conversation that means the final communion of your souls. You have to wait together for a week, for a year, for a lifetime before the final intimate conversation may be attained and exhausted. So that in effect was love.
Beautiful. You have a romantic soul in you.
Yeah, I just remembered when you were discussing the elephant in the room problem.
I think it took you about 15 seconds to read that poem. So if you add it to your act, you can last 20 seconds. And she'll also come when she hears you read it.
Yeah.
But,
On this data, I'm actually extremely interested in this data because, I fully agree with you that there is a social crisis in India, which is the separation between men and women. Okay, it is crazy. The parda that we have in India, that the two genders stand apart, is something that is just completely broken. It interferes with the emergence of the good society. And so I was very fascinated by this data, and it is very, very micro data. They have given this information at the level of the lowest administrative boundaries in the GADM database. So I feel that this should become the staple of a whole bunch of researchers who would be able to use this information at the level of a city, at the level of a district, at the level of a homogeneous region in the CMI CPHS database, and so on, as a measure of what is going on in the society. So I think that's a great and important milestone in terms of measurement in India. So, gentle reader, we're at the end of this episode. We hope you found it as interesting as we did. Tell us in the comments, what are novel ways to measure the engagement between men and women in the world and in India? And what kinds of novel insights are we now able to see that we were not able to find 10 years ago and 20 years ago.
And I want to add to that, and I want to say that, and again, I want to say it's a very serious question. Give us your novel insights about what is happening in society in general, about everything that we spoke about. And I feel that a lot of people, a lot of economists, a lot of people who are good with numbers are working on the wrong things. Like, I have become very cynical about public policy and economics and all of that. I think that we actually know what is the right thing to do at a policy level. We also know that it won't be done. कुछ नहीं उखाड़ेंगे, that game is lost. I know you want to play the long game, more power to you, I'm with you. But I think the deeper questions we need to solve are questions about society. We don't understand ourselves. We don't understand other people. George Simenon, one of my favorite novelists of all time, incredible writer, once spoke about how the fundamental theme that went through all his work is that it is impossible for any one person to communicate himself to another person. We can never truly know another person. I would argue at one level we can never truly know ourselves. These are the great problems of humanity, right? GDP का 0.5% कैसे ये करना है, इसको क्या measure करना है, inflation targeting, I shouldn't say it in that tone. All of this, like, fine, whatever. But if you have a data mind, if you, have all of the frameworks that a good economist should have, which is not only the economics frameworks, but the frameworks for understanding the world like a true Renaissance person, because everything is everything. Frameworks from psychology, from sociology, from anthropology, from genetics, from data, from economics, from literature. All of these, apply it to the great mystery of humanity. That is a mystery. GDP देख लेंगे.
Your heart is like an ocean, mysterious and dark.